Concentration, or A Game of Concentration, was released on the Atari 2600 in 1978. You're given a 4x4 or 6x5 grid of cards. You pick one to reveal the object behind it, and then you pick a second one to try and match it, which clears those cards off the board. So basically, it's the card game memory. It's visually about as plain as you can get, with a solid color background and plain squares for cards. But the objects on the back of the cards are recognizable, colorful, and are placed randomly, so you don't get the same puzzle more than once. In a two-player game, you get either 1 or 2 points per match, depending on which difficulty you set for each player. So you can handicap the game to create competitive balance if you want. Whichever player scores the most points after all the cards are cleared wins the game. But in the one-player mode, you don't face off against the CPU. Instead, you get a point against you for each failed attempt at matching, and the goal is to clear the board in as few turns as possible. There's not a lot in terms of game variations. Like I said, you can change the grid, the scoring system, and whether you operate on 1 or 2 players. But aside from that, the only other variation is whether or not to include a wild card. 2 of these wild cards are put into the game, and it will automatically match up with whatever card you pick next, clearing them both. This adds a little something to the mix, but the problem is that once you clear something with one wild card, you have to match the other wild card with the same object, or you won't be able to finish the game. Like if I match the wild card with this bell, then I have to match the other bell with the other wild card. Because if I end up matching the wild card with the castle, then I'll get stuck with the other bell and castle still hanging around with nothing to match either one of them to. Not sure if this was intentional to add some stakes to the game, or if it was just a complete oversight. I feel like it's more likely the latter. The controls are weird. Instead of scrolling through the blocks with one of them acting as the cursor, like in a menu, instead you'll use the keypad controller, where you manually enter the number of the card you want to flip based on its position on the grid. In case you're unsure which number is represented by which square, the numbers will scroll across the screen in a vertical line, which is not only confusing at first glance, it's also pretty jarring. I mean, I'm pretty sure that graphical limitations keep the game from displaying all the numbers at once. This is an early 2600 game after all. But it just adds to the strangeness of the decision to greenlight this control scheme. It's especially annoying when you choose a square and then sit around and wait for the numbers to scroll across so you can confirm that you've got the right number, and then you have to double check the number you've inputted before entering. It's just too many chores on top of remembering the cards that you flipped, which is the sole point of the game. All this other crap are just distractions. Not to mention that you have to go out of your way to get a controller that the console doesn't get a lot of use from. I know this was way early in the 2600's existence, so it was hard to tell which accessories people would be using down the road, but still, they could have made the interface better. On the other hand, these aren't issues that ruin the game completely, they just upset the general flow of the game. There's also not a lot of depth to the game to begin with, and there isn't much in terms of variations. But this was an early 2600 game, so it's expected to be fairly bare bones, and it's made mainly for kids, so it's more or less what it's supposed to be. That being said, there could have been more.